Good evening to all. Can you hear me? Now I suppose it works. So, first of all, I would like to wish you a happy school year because as I can see more or less this week or next week or the previous week, we are all back at schools. And I really hope you had a great time during summer and you recharged your batteries and you're ready to work with your students, to work in twinning, to do great things. Um, We have the Back to Group campaign in the Creative Classroom as we do every year. All the guys know what we are doing. So we start this school year with a really interesting expert talk. It's about digital citizenship, and I really believe that it's a really important topic, and we're going to discuss about that for some time from now on. And as we're working in e-twinning and with digital tools and online, I think we should be aware of some things. And that's why I'm very glad because we have with us Dr. Michael Ribble, who is actually an author of the books on digital citizenship in schools and raising a digital child. And he's worked within the education field. He comes from Kansas, United States. And he's interested in helping his students, teachers, parents to understand the issues around technology and how to use these tools appropriately. I would like to thank him really very much for organizing that for the Creative Classroom group. And I don't want to say more, so I just give the floor to him. So, Michael, you can.
Welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. I want to thank first the opportunity just to come and to talk to everybody. This is an opportunity that I don't get very often. I do talk to quite a few folks here in the United States, but uh, talking to teachers around the world, I've had some opportunities to get into to Europe and to Southeast Asia and some other places to talk about this. And right now, this is one of those really growing topics that we've got a lot of people that are interested in it. I've got a group of people that I'm working with, and I'll mention them as we move along through this session and talk a little bit about what we're doing here and hopefully expanding it to more of a global discussion because I think these are topics that we are all involved with. And from what I could see from your website, you're all involved in multidisciplinary topics that cover so many different areas, and digital citizenship is definitely one of those areas that crosses over quite a few different areas and quite a few different topics. So um, I'll just go ahead and get started. I will try to keep an eye on the chat window as we go along. So if you do have some questions, I will try to keep an eye on it, and please let me know if there are things that you want to go and talk about a little bit. But in an hour, we're not going to get real in depth into all the different aspects of digital citizenship and what we're doing, but hopefully that will lead into some follow-up discussions that we can have at another time as well. So, as Irene mentioned, I've written a couple of books on the topic of digital citizenship. You'll see it here on the slides, uh, talking about digital citizenship in schools. I work with an organization called ISTE. For those that don't know what ISTE is, ISTE stands for the International Society for Technology and Education. It is based here in the United States, and there's lots of different aspects to ISTE, not just digital citizenship, but many parts to it that we are involved with, a lot with digital literacy and how that looks. So if you're interested in finding out more, just go to iste.org and you can find out more information. But going back, as I said, they've been very supportive in the work that I've done. They did my first edition, and now we're in our third edition. This last one I'm very, very excited about because we did focus a lot on what was going on out in the schools and the districts, and really focused on, how do we use digital citizenship, and what does it mean as we talk about it. And I've had opportunities to talk to folks that are in some of the teacher preparation programs, both here in the United States. Um, the They are starting to focus on this topic and helping their students as well. The title that I've given this to talk about students becoming safe, savvy, and social are three of our, sort of overarching topics that we kind of focus on. And of course, everybody wants our students to be safe, and that's one of the major things that we want to focus on. But the ideas of savvy and social sometimes are a little bit harder to understand. Savvy, we want them to be able to grasp all the topics that go into it, and I'm going to break it down here in a little bit of what are areas that we focus on. But they have to have a basis in knowledge of those areas, because just like any other skill, whether it's language or in mathematics or science or whatever it might be. But it is, definitely one of those things that we need to be talking about. And then, as Irene mentioned, a lot of our focus is also working with parents and working with communities. So those are two big areas for us as well. So let me move into this. And when we talk about technology, especially for some that may not have grown up with it, may not be as savvy, have that knowledge, it can be a fearful thing. And a lot of times, when we talk to educators, it's about the fear. It's about what can go wrong. What are the problems that go along with technology? And the piece that we want to talk about is that fear is not a bad thing. Fear helps us to understand that we have concerns about things. And the only way that we can address fear is to gain more understanding, to become more savvy about the technology. And the interesting piece on a lot of this is that our students don't have a lot of that fear. And not that we need to make them fearful, but we need them to understand that there are aspects that they need to understand and to be aware of, because that goes into the safety piece. And how do we talk about that? So I've just thrown up, these are just some headlines from about the last 6 months here in the United States. And these are not unusual for other places. We talk about what are the dangerous things, where are the dangerous places to go to, what does social media do to our children, and I'll talk a little bit about that, because there's been some interesting work that will be something that we want to talk about throughout this discussion of digital citizenship, because this idea of how we use technology and how it's affecting us is going to be a discussion point over the long haul. Talking about how people are utilizing it, here's a child that was on an iPad and spends $5,000 on playing Jurassic World, and teens because of how they use technology. Sexting here in the United States is a major concern, and something that we definitely are talking about and talking with our students, and how all of our different children are utilizing the technology. So these are all the negative things, and a lot of times these are the things that our parents see, and they come to our schools and say, I don't want my child on a computer or on an iPad or on a, because these are the kinds of things that might happen, and these are the things that we need to address. Something that I've, been doing more research on here lately is the idea of anonymity online. And one of the major ones, if you haven't heard about it already, you might want to do a little research on the dark web or the deep web and the amount of anonymity that's out there and how you can hide yourself and hide what you're doing out there. And again, it's not something that we have to be afraid of. I think it's something that we need to be aware of. And the more that we're aware of, then we can help and we can address it with our students. So I just talk about this just so that you have some idea of that, the topics that are out there. I saw this book a few years back, and this was done way before computers. This was actually written in the late 70s, early 1980s. And this idea of how we are changing over time, and especially our children. And I thought it was interesting that this came out even before we started to talk about computers and what its effects are. One of the newer books that I've been looking at is by a woman by the name of Mary Aiken, and she is a cyber psychologist, and she talks about many of these same ideas. And as I get through her book, I'll probably be talking more about Dr. Aiken and her work. But I thought it was interesting from Postman's perspective that sometimes things happen that we create things for one purpose, and one of those things is a cell phone, for example. That by its definition, if we just call it a cell phone instead of a smartphone, that's what it's to do. It was created to make phone calls. And now it has become this personal device of everything that we want to do. It becomes our alarm clock. It becomes our even our television set and our music, and carries everything with us. And now we want them to do more and more. Just yesterday here in the United States, the release of the iPhone 7, and I've been so interested to see all the reactions of, well, what else does it do? What else can this iPhone 7 do? That it's just like every other one. So it's interesting to see that how change is happening to us. And in Postman, what I thought was interesting was that when he was even talking about a television set, he was focusing on this erosion between childhood and adulthood as technology expanded. And I thought it was so interesting to make that connection, that when Neil Postman put that he identified three things, and this again was talking about a television, is that one, it requires no instruction to understand its form. So the same thing with, say, a cell phone. So when we hand this to a child, we hand this to an adult, we hand it to whoever, it really needs no instruction, to understand what it is. You turn on the phone and it works. Then second, that it does not make complex demands on our mind or behavior. We've made these things so simple that we just click on an app and things pop up, and it's everything just seems to come. So there is no demands. And the third, I thought, was the most telling. It doesn't segregate its audience. It doesn't say you have to be X amount of years old to be able to utilize this. And uh, reading Dr. Aiken's book that she just put out, she talks about this idea of how we're handing over these technologies to our children. And I've seen a lot of research here in the United States that's saying that our children are having more and more contact with technology at a younger and younger age. And once they reach school, it's almost become, sort of a requirement because they, are, you know, so inundated, so involved with the technology that there's certain expectation that we should be teaching these and utilizing all of these tools, which I'm not saying we shouldn't, but they've already had 2, 3, 4 years of experience, at least in the United States, in our experience, but they are getting more and more of this as they are starting as young children. So first, I guess we need to step back and we need to decide, what do we hope for our children? What do we want for our students? And that's where we always need to start because, when we look at, what is the mission of education? What is our hope that when we look at any aspect, whether again going back to any of our major themes of language or science or mathematics, what is our goal? What is our end goal as we look at this? And I think that technology and its use and appropriate use is one of those things that we need to make sure that we are ready for. So this, on the flip side, are the positive things that we want to look at. You know, how can we get teachers to embrace the technology tools, which many, many are, but there are still some that don't. Collaborative learning, between the United States and globally, this is becoming a larger and larger discussion point. And I will say that ISTE, that I mentioned earlier, one of their major focuses is creating that global discussion about technology and interaction both from our students and to your students, and how do we create that cross-culturally. Creating positive impact in the classroom. For us here in the United States, we've been focusing on STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We've even now added the A, calling it STEAM, adding the arts in there as well. But as you can see, technology, mathematics, engineering, a lot of things that have ties back into technology. Technology as a support tool for instruction, that's where I've always believed that the strength of technology resides, is being able to support you as educators and be able to help your students to move further and beyond where we would have if we would not have had that technology within the classroom. So I've just given a whole lot of information, and now we're really talking about what is digital citizenship? Why are we even talking about this digital idea of citizenship? And why aren't we just talking about citizenship in general? Because, the hope is that, we are creating, students that are utilizing these tools, and it's not something apart from what they do in their regular life. So let's talk just a little bit about that. One, when I started talking about digital citizenship, and I've been doing this for over a decade now, and I did my dissertation work on it and really started to focus on the citizenship aspect and separated it from the digital piece and wanted to think about how do we as people interact? how do we as individuals, how do we live and how do we um, play, work, do all of those aspects of our daily life? And how is that changing as we talk about this in the digital world? So first, we live in communities. We live as people of societies. We want to live in groups. And we see this again in the digital world carrying over. We see it in social media. And I know that at least here in the United States, we don't use Facebook as much, but Facebook and Twitter, and there's multiple different aspects to the social media piece. So how do we build on that when we talk about the digital world? So is this world, this interaction, this being together, is it any different than this? Are we different people when we are on a digital device? And should we? So that becomes some of the core question, because there are many people that if you ask them about digital citizenship, they just say, well, let's just drop the digital and we'll just talk about citizenship. My hope is that we will get there at some point, and I believe that we will, as a society, as users of technology, that we will see a coming together of both our real world, our real life, and our digital or online life, and how those interact. Today, I'm not sure that we see them as tied to one another, and especially when we talk to students, because I think that the screen, that separation, causes us to have us look at technology differently. And hopefully, there's a couple of things that we'll talk about later that will help to talk about how do we start making that change about how we are both online and offline. I will tell you that I take a lot of from different researchers, and Sherry Turkle's book. She has multiple, and she just has one that she just released. But her book Alone Together was one of those that also kind of gave me inspiration on this idea of how we are online versus offline. And she talks about this idea of online social media like Second Life or Facebook, or we post things, but we have this idea that it's this intimate conversation, and it's not so much that it is all the time, that it's not always authentic to who we are. And we were told that we can do anything, we can go anywhere, we can be we can travel the world without ever leaving our home. And that's this idea of having all of this connection, but also being almost separated from people. And that's that interesting didactic that we come up when we talk about technology, that how it used to be like with Facebook is how many friends did you have, and there was this idea of I want to collect as many friends. I want to I've got 1,000 friends, and I think people are starting to back away and really trying to find more connections, more authenticity of what that is. But it's hard because, as I mentioned, Mary Aiken's book, that she's a cyber psychologist, and the idea is that we get we derive pleasure from sharing these ideas, and a lot of the research is saying that when we are online, we talk about ourselves 80% of the time, where if we're face to face, we talk about ourselves about 20% of the time. And it gives us, there's actual research that shows that by us posting and getting likes and getting support for what we post, we get positive reinforcement. And it's actually a neurochemical reaction. Don't want to get too too into it, but it does talk about the dopamine levels and all of those, and that's actually been proven in research that people are getting these reactions very much like a drug almost. And we sometimes talk about addiction and those, but there is something to be said about those parts of it and how it affects us. So when I talk about digital citizenship, my focus is the norms of appropriate and responsible behavior with regard to technology use. And I do put in the words specifically for a reason. I put in the norms, and the word norms is very important because your norms in your school and your building, with your students, may be different than somebody else's. So you have to identify what are those baseline. What do we believe in? What are the things that we respect and what we want from people who use technology? And then from there, identifying what is appropriate and responsible with regard to that. So a lot of nuances in there, but it does focus on the individual grouping, but still backing off to say we are still looking at this in a larger context of how we tie together. So it's some interesting aspects. And I'm just noticing some of the chat. Thank you for the people there sharing. Yes, it does lead to some new solitude, and I think I did see someone that put Sherry Turkle's link in there. So thank you for that as well. So I'm going to just share this real quick. If you want to look at it more, you can go to my website at digitalcitizenship.net, or you can take a look at my book. But I've broken down digital citizenship into what I called my 9 elements. And then a few years back, what I did was then I tied them back to 3 topic areas of respect, educate, and protect. So REP, which rep, what each one of those start with, to me is short for repetition. And that's what we do in education, is we don't just share things one time. We put things out there and then we share it again, and we go into this process of helping our students to understand not just what it is today, but how it will affect them as they continue through education and continue to move through. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the reps today, just because we could go in a whole different direction and talk about it. But I wanted you to see those and talk, just so that you knew a little bit about the respect, educate, and protect. And I do have this broken down to begin a process of how do we begin to look at them. And excuse, these are United States breakdowns and using kindergarten and then each of the levels, but you get an idea of sort of the topic areas that I believe that can be focused on at different levels. And then what we do is we build upon them as we go through it. And like I said, this is on my website. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want you to see that there is a process, and that we go through this in these different reps or repetitions of the ideas. And hopefully we build towards an idea of everyone having some basic, um, more of a focal point to to talk about, so that when our students get to a certain level, that they are knowledgeable of these topics. So I think, these are some important areas, and like I said, this goes back to my original research that I did. So when we look at the different aspects, and we talk about, and we've started to use a different terminology, and a lot of you probably have heard of a digital footprint. We started talking about a digital tattoo about 3 or 4 years ago. This was it was brought up at an ISTE conference, and it was talked about. And the reason that we talk about tattoo versus a footprint is that for many different reasons. One, a digital tattoo is more to the discussion point of that this is more permanent, because I know that lots of countries, and I know that part of the European Union had worked on this, as the ability to be forgotten. But the hard part is, as things are shared, it's harder to know exactly where it goes to, because things get shared all over the globe. And just because you know you take it off, or it's taken off of Facebook or Twitter or whatever at a certain, at age 18 or whatever it might be, there could be, information still out there. Also, with a tattoo, you're making a conscientious choice with a tattoo, where to me, a footprint, just by walking, you have placed that, behind you. But a tattoo, you've made those decisions. You've made the decision to put that information, those ideas out there. So we want to talk about our students about this, and how do we create a positive image. Now, these are just a few of the different social media, at least here in the United States, and I still put Facebook up there because I found that a lot of parents, especially here in the United States, seem to feel more comfortable to allow their students to start with Facebook, because that's what they're comfortable with. And so, we tend to have students that still use that. And I have two grown children. I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. And my 20-year-old was telling me that Facebook is actually becoming more popular again. So, as things change, old things come back, and things change over time. Twitter, of course, is depending on your different organization. They very popular. Small, information very quickly. We do a Twitter chat on digital citizenship. We share a lot of ideas. Professional development seems to be very popular in Twitter, to the other. Some of the others, Tumblr, Vine, Kick, Feed, and then of course there in the middle bottom is Snapchat. Is very, very popular. And I, I digress for just a second, because I wanted to understand what the interest in Snapchat was. I have it. I've done it a little bit, but I didn't really understand it. And when I was talking to my children, especially my 20-year-old, and she was explaining to me that Snapchat becomes almost more conversational, that it's more, they want to be able to have that open discussion with each other and be able to share. And I thought that was an interesting, idea of, instead of, picking up and actually calling, but they could have this conversation through Snapchat with a lot of them. Seeing a lot of responses. Thank you for sharing. A lot of Facebook. Instagram is huge. I don't have that up there on this one, but we do talk a lot about Instagram. I've got some got some stories of different Instagram things that have happened. One of them I will share real quickly. Uh, well, a couple of stories real quickly. One, I was in Los Angeles and I was speaking to a classroom, and it was in a more affluent part of Los Angeles. It was a private school, and we were talking about digital citizenship, and we were talking about the different elements. And at the end of the presentation, the teacher that was in the classroom, very just almost off the cuff, said, how many of you students have or have access to an Instagram account? Now, these are grade 2 students. So these are, 7, 8-year-old students, and it was amazing to me that 3/4 of the hands went up in that classroom. They had already, and this has been a couple of years ago, it was amazing to me how they had already become so inundated with social media at that age. The other just quick example was a group of 6th graders, so they're a little bit older. They are 10, 11, maybe could be some as old as 12. But they were going on a field trip to Washington, D.C., and the teacher just said, sort of off the cuff, we're going to do a scavenger hunt, and why don't you go ahead and download Instagram? And they were a 1-to-1 school, and they had iPads, and go ahead and put Instagram on your iPads. And they did that, and they had their scavenger hunt using the Instagram, and everything was fine. But then when they came back to school, all of a sudden there was this high incidences of sexting among these 11, 12-year-old students. And, they, all of a sudden were utilizing it for something that was very opposite of what, the original idea and concept was for it. So when I talk to my students, one of those things that I suggest is using what I call my step process. And this is any time that they're in social media is to go through this 4-step process. And I tell everybody that anytime, and this has, this is email, this is anything, to just stop for a second. Just take a moment. So then you can start to, contemplate what you want to do and what you want to say. Because I think sometimes things are so rapid that we want to respond without really taking the time. And the second is think. And think is not, this isn't from me. This is actually, this goes back to the Josephson Institute. They talked about think as an acronym, and everybody should be thinking about what they do. And that is, when you say something or post something, does it meet these criteria? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring confidence? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And you'll find all kinds of posters on Think. You just put Think acronym, and you're going to find all kinds of posters all over the web. And I think that it's one of those things that everybody should do, because when we see the negative things online, when we see those negative tattoo kinds of things, it's when people don't go through this think process. and really identify, should we be putting this? The next is empathize. Empathy is an aspect both in the real world and online world that I think that we're having an issue with. As a matter of fact, we've tracked it here in the United States. The University of Michigan has been doing a longitudinal study since the 1970s on empathy. Now, this is all pre-technology, so they've actually been tracking it as a societal topic. And they've been doing it now for almost 40 years, this empathy study. And they have tracked a decrease over time of empathy in students. These are freshman students coming to the University of Michigan. So standing back and thinking about what other people, how they feel, or how they might respond or might take a comment, I think is so important. And again, I think it's the speed that people want to put things out there. They see a comment and they want to respond, and that goes back to the stop. That idea of taking that time, just taking a breath before we do something. And really, like I said, even an email, sometimes I think we say things, we do things, and it's not necessarily that we're doing it to be bad people, but we just don't step back and look at it from a different perspective. And that's what empathy is. It's really coming from a different idea. And to me, if you've done those things, if you've stopped, if you've thought about it, if you've empathized, then go ahead and post. And I take that, that to me is an important part of it that completes it. And the other part of it is choosing not to post or not to say something. And it's not to say that I'm taking away people's rights and that they shouldn't be able to say something, but I think we have to choose. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the right information? And am I saying the right thing? So that's why I put together STEP. And this is that poster that I talked about. Like I said, you'll see these all over the internet, and they're, it goes back even pre-social media, but you'll see this as you see it. Another book that if you're interested in reading about issues and how those played out, and some of them I'm sure you've read about, is Matt Ivester's book, and it's called LOLOMG. And of course, that stands for the laugh out loud and then, oh my gosh. But his book, and I've talked to Matt on a couple of different times, he was very deeply involved in social media. And if you read his book or read anything, if you go to his site, he tells about his experience. He had a social media site that was popular for a while, wasn't as big as MySpace or Facebook or anything like that, but he was out there. And I asked him if I could share these questions out of his book. And I think these are things that we need to ask ourselves, but we need to ask, our students need to ask, what's out there. And, why are you online? Why do you have a social media account? Is this the right time? I get that all the time with parents. They want me to tell them, when should my child have their first social media account? When should they have their first cell phone? When should they have, my answer is typically it depends, because children are very different from each other. And I think you have to look at the individual as opposed to a blanket discussion. Now, most social media, if you read their terms of use, will say, you have to be 13 years old or older to have a social media account. So And I'm reading some of the chat responses. Yes, this has become the way that students communicate with each other, and they are out there, uh, and that's how they communicate. And it's a different time, and I'm not saying it isn't, um, but it's changing, and that's something that Mary Aiken mentions, is that we're getting to a point where we're going through an adaptation. I don't want to say an evolution, but an adaptation to the devices and to the technology, and it is changing us. And then, even this idea of what's public and what's private, and there are adults that don't know those things, and that's pieces that you have to keep in mind. And we've talked a lot about Instagram. This is from their um, terms of use. I'm one of those few people that actually goes out and reads terms of use, and it was interesting because the reason that I pulled this up originally was from that meeting in Los Angeles, um, because of those 7-year-olds that were online. And the very first term, as you can see, I've kept the numbering. You must be at least 13 years old to use the service. And I know that that's protection for that company. They put that out there, but we need to talk about you know what does that mean, and can they uh, use those devices and use that whenever they want, or does there need to be some connection between parents and students of how they use it? And then just some of the different pieces. And I mentioned the sexting, and the very second thing is you may not post violent, nude, partially nude, discriminatory, unlawful infringement, sexually suggested photos are on the service. So, these are, all of those pieces, um, that are out there. So just a lot of things that kind of tie into this topic. So as I said, when I was talking about Matt Ivester's work, when is the right time? And I was on a Twitter chat, and I was talking about the same idea. I was talking about Matt Ivester's work, and a gentleman by the name of Peter Andrada, and um, you can look him up. Uh, Peter works for IBM, but sort of on the side, he does a lot of work in this area of digital citizenship and appropriate use and those kinds of things. And I I talked to Peter for a while, and he said, well, I, for my own children, came up with this 3-step piece about when he saw was the right time. So, some of the things, can a child stay home alone by themselves, for an extended period of time? That shows responsibility, shows the ability to, take care of themselves, take care of the space around them. Can my child confidently speak to a stranger in public? And I'm not just saying that they go up to somebody in a park and just start talking to them, but can they go to a store clerk and ask for information, and then be able to separate and be able to come away from that with the information they needed, but also get out of that conversation. So, and those kinds of pieces, in the real world, those are things that we have taught our kids for a long time. And then the third one I thought was very interesting about the self-worth test, and having your child think and be able to expand on things that they like to do, that they do well, and beyond just technology, and being able to show that they have other interests, other things outside of just the online community, that's not where their self-worth comes from, but they have other things that are of interest. So it's just interesting, how we tie those things together. For us here in the United States, we, of course, are very much a car culture. We have a lot of students, especially that are in that teenage area, that go through driver's education. And I know that there are programs that you have as well in the EU. But we see this similar to that there are two real aspects to digital citizenship. One, you have to understand basically the rules of the road. You have to know, you know, what, you know, what you need to do, what are so the basic rules, how we do things. And then we need to go out and do it. And that does take people being with us. And just like in a driver's education course, we utilize, the teenager, the driver, and somebody sitting next to them to watch over, to provide some input, to share about how they're doing and what they should be thinking about, and all the different aspects. So it's one of those things that we try to share those, but we also need to give input on when they're not doing things quite right. And I think that's sometimes hard for us, that we seem to be concerned about saying anything to anybody about how they do things or how they act online. And so we need to give them some guidance in this as well. I know this is also more focused in the United States, but this is a program that is mentioned in my third edition. This is out of the University of Kentucky, the State Department of Kentucky here in the United States. But I put it in there because I wanted to show again how schools and education are tying these ideas together. And the nice thing about this, which is DDL, which I tied that to the driver's education, which DDL stands for Digital Driver's License, and they also have an app that you can see there at the top called iDrive Digital, and they have created this program that uses the elements that I talked about above and how that ties together into this idea of using it in the curriculum and using it as a part of teaching and reteaching and sharing these ideas of digital citizenship throughout the curriculum. So I put that in there more just for informational, but to be on the outlook for different ideas and topics that tie this in. And the folks in Kentucky, if you're ever interested and want to, make contact with them and get involved with them, they have even shared their research and their even the actual program with other countries, because Canada, for example, has passed a law that says that they can only use programs that reside within that country. And the folks from DDL, the University of Kentucky, actually gave them the program so they could put it on their servers up in Canada so that they could do it. So they are very interested in helping out, and they would love to make contact with folks outside of the United States as well. I mentioned early on, parents must be involved with this discussion. I can't reiterate that enough. That was, even before I did my dissertation piece, I really, really wanted to focus on the parents because, as I said earlier in this discussion, is that the parents are, focal because they are providing that first point of contact. They are beginning that discussion with their students, and some of them are very, providing, are talking about these things, and some of them are not. So we have students that come to us with multiple, um, different ideas of how we look at technology. So, the expectation, and I was looking through the chat, a little bit ago, and people were talking about digital natives and how these kids are growing up with this technology, and but there are some that are more involved with it than others. So some have had long discussions. I've talked to kids where they said that their parents have had those discussions with them. They have, had those opportunities. And then there's those that have not. And how do we connect those? How do we tie those back in together? And we need to partner with our parents. And I know a lot of you have had back to school nights, and you've had those discussions, and some of it's completely separated. We're not going to do technology. We're not going to do that. And it's sort of this world and this world, and they don't come together. And I think that's a difficult aspect because kids are seeing that in the world, and we're so inundated with these images when we talk about technology. And if we're not discussing it in schools, if we're not tying it in, and then we're saying, but when you go into a business or even to university or whatever, you're going to have to figure this out. You're going to have to utilize, these tools. And so parents are very important in this. Um, this image, this is a fast food restaurant here in the United States called Chick-fil-A, as you can see. Um, the interesting thing is that they had to they wanted to go to the next level. And I thought it was interesting that, basically, they're saying to get your family to, utilize this time together, just to sit down and even eat, is here's a place to put all of your devices, away from, the family while they actually have dinner. And it's interesting that, even, fast food restaurants like this are to the point where, they're getting involved in this idea of, how we utilize technology and what that looks like, beyond just saying, okay, here everybody's sitting together, but everybody's on their cell phone or on their device or whatever. And it's showing that, yes, we are seeing this combining of ideas of both the digital and the real world, but we also want to make sure that we're still building those skills, especially those face-to-face skills, those offline skills of how do we interact with each other? How do we become good social people in the real world so that when we get to that place of this idea of just citizenship involving this idea of the digital and the real world together, how are we going to look at that? How are we going to make sure that one does not overarch on the other, or one does not cause issues to the other? And again, I've mentioned Dr. Aiken's book many times in this presentation, but I've just been fascinated in this latest book that the little things that we talk about with technology, how they reverberate um, throughout how we are as people. And I want to give one just final example. She was actually doing she was traveling in Ireland. She was going across the country, and she was riding the train, and she was watching a mother that was feeding her child, and she had the child in one hand and had the bottle, was holding it, but in her other hand she had a device. She had a cell phone or something. And during the entire time that the child was feeding, she was completely focused on the device and not on the child. And Dr. Aiken said, this is a small thing. This isn't a huge aspect. And she didn't know anything about this mother and, was going on. But that connection between a mother and a child, or, any, connection with another person, has been changed. And we are adapting differently to how we use the technology. And what will that look like in our next generation as we have these children who have been brought up where the focus has been the device and less with, with the child, with how they are tied. So how do we make those two tied together? How do we bring those in connection? So a couple of things I just want to mention kind of here in brief, and this is in the book. I think that there are process, and this is in one of my chapters, is going through this cycle of figuring out where you are. I've seen a lot of comments about some, if where you are. Some of you have no technology, some of you have a lot of technology. It just really depends. And see where you are, and then go through this process. And it's no different than any other implementation. Auditing, gathering the information, where are the potential, providing resources, and then creating a plan or a program. So, I think that those are all, pretty basic things. I'm fortunate that I'm also teaching a online graduate course about technology, not just focused on digital citizenship, but digital citizenship is actually a part of it. And one of the things that we have our students do is what's called SWOT, which stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. And if you haven't done a SWOT analysis, I would suggest going out to the internet, doing a little research on SWOT, and looking at that in relationship to your technology and how it's used. Because SWOT gives you a starting point going back to, this last one, in this audit piece, is using SWOT to find where are the things you need to focus on and what are you doing well, what are your strengths. So, I think too often we just focus on the weaknesses and the threats, but I think that you have to understand the strengths and the opportunities to do this well. So if you haven't done that, that's something that you should do. This is also in the book. I just wanted to put this out there. This is a school district up in Canada who did go through a multi-year process of using digital citizenship and how that played out. And they have a whole, there's a section in there in the book that goes through not just year 1 and 2, but up through year 5. And I just didn't put all of it there. But I wanted you to see that it is a journey, that it is a process. And what they did, and everybody wants to get to the end point, and I get that, that's important. But how do you get there? And I really like their process. And again, if you get a chance, take a look at my book, and you can see, and they explain, and then there's examples in the back of the book of how they did that and some of the courses and things that they did. So some interesting things there. So we're all the way back from where we were at the beginning when I asked the question, what do you want for your students? When you talk about technology, when you talk about how you use the digital tools that are available, what are your hopes? What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to go? And as I started with, my hope has always been to have our children to be safe, savvy, and social. Those are major underpinnings of where I see technology and where it goes, that you need to understand, your teachers need to understand, and your parents and eventually your students have to understand all of these aspects, so that when we start talking about the fear, when we start talking about what could go wrong, we are aware, we understand, we have knowledge. So we want them to get there. So, and thank you for Amelia. Yes, we want them to be respectful too. We want them to tie that into, help them. So it's important that we bring that full circle. When I was growing up, my mother is also a teacher. She often would tell me when I would look at these large problems is, how do you eat an elephant? And her answer always was, one bite at a time. So this may be, look like an overwhelming topic, but you have to look at it one aspect at a time. And that's how you break it down, is start to take the parts, look at where you want to go and what that's going to do, and just take that one bite and continue to move forward. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to come and just speak to all of you. It's always great to just share these ideas, getting these ideas out there. And please let me know, or let Irene know if there's anything that you would like to follow up with, or any topics that you want to discuss. I mean, I have a lot of other resource people that I could put you in contact with, but I appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. I appreciate you being here. I know it's later and it's in the evening for you, but I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you, Irene. Thank you to everyone.
I have to say thank you. It was really, really interesting, and you gave, so many perspectives. Honestly, I really understood better about digital citizenship, what it's about, what we have to do, the step, and all these things. I mean, you really, personally opened my eyes on many subjects. I think it was very, very helpful. And I think it will be helpful for everybody, Mike. So thank you for organizing that and for sharing, your knowledge with all us. And you could see that the audience was quite live, very live, and they were discussing everything, and they had many things to share. I don't want to keep you long. I don't see any question here. So as Mike said, you can even contact him directly, or you can contact me too as well. So thank you once again, and have a great afternoon, I think, right, for you, Mike. And thank you all for joining in the first expert talk of this school year. So we're going to have more, and we will keep in touch. And enjoy your weekend as well. So have a nice evening. Bye-bye.